Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day. And today we're going to be talking about all of the spells that they changed in the most recent update in Wizard101. If you guys don't know, they changed a bunch of spells. Honestly, this one is not as big of an audit as I thought it would be because it didn't actually cover everything. However, what it did cover is very interesting. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The very first thing that we must talk about is the fact that Scales of Destiny finally got a nerf. This spell is like a rank magnet right now. I mean, it literally is so powerful. The way it works is for an ice pip, a life pip, and a regular pip, you can use this spell, and if you're above 50% HP, you get an ice or life pip back. That makes the value of the spell like 3 pips basically, and it's very powerful. Even right now, I would argue that this is the most powerful spell that Balance has. It got nerfed. Will it really change how good Balance is? I don't know. I feel like this was dookie on people, and now the dookie is just a little less easy to dookie with. So that's all it really is. But what they did change is really interesting, so I thought we would talk about it. The first thing I'm going to start with is the Shad spells, and we're going to start with Mockenspiel because I think it's the most used one. This is a very, very weird spell, y'all. It now, what it does, I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory. What it does is it hits, and then it either does a 25 blade on you or does a minus 25 weakness on your opponent. There's nothing special about the blades or the weaknesses as far as I know. It's just universal stuff, but it's very interesting. This seems to be a very Storm identity type of spell, which it's like, it looks just like Hammer of Thor, except it's a Shad spell. It does a ton of damage. This is actually a buff for Balance, y'all, because it used to be, Mockenspiel used to be weird. It used to have a utility where it turned blades into balance blades, like if they weren't balance blades already, but it would like half the value. It was extremely situational, especially when people can literally pack what is it, putrefaction. When people can pack this spell, you putting any blades on yourself is a very big risk. So I don't really know exactly what Mockenspiel used to be, but it's good that it's not weird anymore because it was unusable. It's more usable now. I kind of love it. You can actually Spellman upgrade it now to raise it up. You weren't able to do that before this update, so Mockenspiel Spellmans actually matter for something. It's a pretty good thing. Let's move on to Gaze of Fate. Now, Gaze of Fate, it looks the same because honestly, they didn't do much to this. I believe the only change that they did was make the balance part of this hit better, and they both do the same amount of damage on each. It's actually a damage buff, so if Gaze was already good, it's even better. There's not really much to say. I feel like the spell's kind of OP, like in its current form. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I just feel like any type of Shad that does this good of a utility, it's always going to be good, but we might get back to the days of the Gaze spamming being really good. This is already extremely good. Now it's just better. And I think this wins the award for the weirdest change we have ever seen in the history of KingSile. Old Man's Endgame is now a hit, and then it does an overtime that basically detonates in 5 rounds. So it stays on your opponent, and after 5 rounds, it does that 195 damage. Now, this is a butt cheek spell, in my opinion, butt cheek tier spell. And the reason I say this is because sure, the 770 is good, but let's not forget, this is 6 pips, Mockenspiel is 5. So if you're trying to do damage and get a blade or a weakness, obviously the Mach is better. So really, the question you should be asking is, does this utility of the overtime, is it good? The thing about that is, flat resist exists. So even though you might think that you're gonna be doing a lot of damage, this 190 damage that's already not that big, it's gonna be subtracted by another 135 when it does detonate. I feel like they're trying to create a thing where you can use overtimes and then use a Jhin, but I think what they're forgetting about Jhin in general is that it literally does a ×2 gambit, meaning each of these 255 hits do double damage when people do an overtime gambit on you as well. That's what this means. That means if there's 2 overtimes on you, you could do this. You don't have to put 2 overtimes on your opponent. I would much rather use Duststorm Jhin when someone's actually trying to overtime gambit me rather than set it up, because why would I ever use Old Man's Endgame when I could use Mockenspiel? This is a golden spell. It's also just not a good PvE spell, even though it's an AoE, because it's some of the damage just gets, you're not gonna wait 5 rounds to hit. So I really don't understand the spell. I guess they're going for something here. I don't get it. Now, I could be wrong, but it doesn't look like Sandworm got a change. It doesn't really look to me like Nested Fury got a change. So that leaves the lore spells, and some of these are a lot stranger than others. Let's start with what I thought was not gonna happen. I said in a couple of videos ago, I didn't think that they would change Samurai because the whole gain pip thing felt like it made sense. But they actually made Samurai into a whole different spell. It's now a hidden shield, very, very similar to Athena. And it looks like this is just a direction that they're going. You might have seen with Mockenspiel, you get universal blades and weaknesses. With Samurai, you're getting shields. With Old Man's Endgame, you're getting overtimes. They're really seeming to do something where Balance just has lore spells that just do something that another lore spell does, but now Balance can do it. Now, I don't really know how good the spell is gonna be. Obviously, it's decent if you have like a brace up or something. Out of all the lore spells, I would say that this was actually one of the better ones that Balance has gotten in a while. I will say this, if you're gonna do a hit and debuff, yes, this is technically, you know, weaker of a hit, but I think a 25 weakness that they cannot pierce through as a right? Like you can pierce through a 30 shield. You can't pierce through a 25 weakness. I feel like Lore Master is still better than this, unless for some reason or another you're doing something where having the extra shield is important. Like maybe you're protecting a shield. Maybe you're like, maybe you do have a brace. I don't know. I think it's more situational than lore. If I'm going to use my balanced school pips, let's not forget, all of these lore spells use balanced school pips. If I'm going to use a balanced school pip for something, I feel like it'd be Lore Master. Now, they didn't change Savage Paw. They didn't change Lore Master. They did not change Spiritual Tribunal. We'll see if these are changes that are going to be added to the game sooner or later. I mean, a lot of these do make sense as balance spells. Like, Spiritual Tribunal is obviously a balance spell. I feel like Lore Master, it's almost iconic to this point. I don't even know why they would change it. But the one spell that did get a very, very, very decent change is Ninja Piglets. And this is a lot of damage, y'all. Out of all the spells I've seen, I think this is the only one that I would actually see myself using. See, unlike Old Man's Endgame, it's actually very utility heavy. So basically what the maxed version of this does, it does 55 damage, and then it does a 650 balance damage detonating overtime. Now, unlike Old Man's Endgame, this overtime is not just going to get canceled out by flat resist. In fact, it's just going to be like hitting with a regular hit. There is a risk, obviously. If someone does an anti-overtime, it's obviously kind of bad. So you might want to have like, you know, you might want to be ready for someone to anti-overtime this. But I could really see myself in a scenario where, you know, maybe they have Ellie shields and a tower is really good and I can't Hydra. I could see this being a really good follow-up into a Mockenspiel, especially if my opponent does not have school pips that counter overtime. So I said, if they don't have like storm pips, I might think about using this. This might be something worth packing. And I'm not sure any of the other spells really are. Really quick, there are some other spells that aren't balance spells that did get changed. I thought I'd include them in this video in case you guys are wondering. We're gonna rapid fire them. Flash Squatch, it steals a shield into a hit now, which is basically like a steel ward into a hit. I think this used to be what Angry Snow Pigs did or Thieving Dragon or something did. Well, now this does it. Basically, it's a very similar utility. They're making Myth and Ice more similar. That's all this is. The only other thing that really changed this update in terms of spells is Colossus. And now what it does, instead of turning your shields into traps and then hitting with those traps, it hits and then turns your shields into traps. There's still 65 traps, y'all. It's kind of nuts. Now, I've heard that this spell might be bugged, but I do think the intention is for it to create multiple 65 traps for you to use later. Obviously, those traps can be countered, so you have to be careful, right? You can't just be hitting with a buffed Colossus, but if you time the trap correctly, or if you can cover it at a good time, these are still some of the most powerful tools that Ice has. That should be every spell change that they did this update, other than a few bug fixes here and there that you guys should experiment with yourselves. But let me know what you guys think of some of these new balance spells. I guess the Colossus change, if you liked that. Do you guys plan on using any of these spells? And how do you plan on countering them if you encounter them in PvP? Drop a like, tell me y'all's opinions. I look forward to reading all of your comments. As always, man, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave us something new. And if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome. And yeah.